one group before us, so Anne will introduce it, and then there'll be a group that'll talk for 7 minutes, and then it'll be up. So we'll just watch. Should I sit over for it?
With that.
What do you reckon? All ready to go?
Get the Zoom on the 2 other.
Hello.
Oh yeah.
How am I doing? Hello. Yep. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. Aside from a number of other things that happened, we're currently competing with a session from the Australia Council on Arts Queensland. So we are a small group, which doesn't matter in the slightest because we're recording everything, and all of this will be available to other people. But since we're such a small group, I thought that we might just introduce ourselves. Can you put up that next slide for me, Elliot? So if you could introduce yourself by name and if you know whose country you work on, and then everybody, and we'll introduce the panelists and then everyone will know who's here.
Hello, I'm Claire and I'm the volunteer support person for this venue, and I live here in Carlton.
Hi, Kirsty Veron, retired arts worker, but on the RADF committee up on the Tablelands Regional Council. Having been very embarrassed not to know which Aboriginal land I was living on, I found out, and I am living on Yiddishi land up on the Tablelands.
Great.
Hello, I'm Ellen Clady from QUT in Brisbane. So we're on Turrbal and Yagara land, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging from this area as well.
Hi, I'm Donna Hancock from QUT, so I also work on Turrbal and Yagara land and pay respects to the traditional owners of this land. Thank you.
So you've got the trifecta. I'm Sandra Danhoff, I'm from QUT as well. Also, I live and work both on Yagara Turrbal.
Fabulous, thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary and I'm also on the same committee as Christy and I'm on the Yiddishi land.
That's good.
Nicole Cash, and I am from the Sunshine Coast and Calgary.
Great, thanks. Let's go to Western Australia. Could you just introduce yourselves? Can you hear people in the room? Hang on. Don't worry about the screen, I'm just doing introductions here. Okay, we haven't got Western Australia up. Right, let's go to Darwin.
Hi from Darwin.
Hey, we can hear you.
I'm Anna Weeks. I'm a creative producer. I live and work on Larrakia and Woolna land in Darwin and the rural surrounds.
Thank you. Bong.
Hi, I'm Bong. I'm a musician. I work for Darwin Community Arts on Larrakia country.
Fabulous. Let's go to Bendigo.
Sorry.
No,
I'm all right. Hi, I'm Forrest Kegel. We're on Jajawarang country in Bendigo, and I work for Multicultural Arts Victoria.
Forrest.
Hi, my name is Buge. I work with the Forest as a culture facilitator for Emerge Culture Hub in Bendigo.
Hi, my name is Amani, and I volunteer and help out with Emerge and at the Multicultural Centre.
Amani and Buge. Oh, yeah. Oh no, you're welcome.
Hi, I'm Bridget Jones. I have my own Brisbane-based consultancy doing research evaluation and planning, and I have a focus on
And we're still waiting on WA. So, but we then have the Fairlight Scrum team. Alex, Elliot, Norm and Sarah, and I'm Anne. All right, so, here you go, WAFB, Monica, welcome.
Hey. Hello.
We're just doing introductions, who you are and who's country you're living on. Now.
Oh, you want us to do that now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Monica Kane, General Manager of Community Arts Network, and I sit here on Noongar country.
I'm Terry Hayden, Noongar woman from here, working with Cam.
And one head to drop in from the side? Okay, fine.
Hello. I'm the other half of General Manager. Monica and I job share.
Doing introductions so that everybody knows who's here. Do you mind just saying who you are and whose country you live on or where you live?
I'm Susie Capewell.
It's good for the people who can't hear.
I'm Susie Capewell. I'm from North Burnett region. I'm a visual artist. We're on Waka Waka country.
Great, thanks, Susie. We're only going to use the mic because the people around the country can't hear you. Susie, Waka Waka country.
Yeah, I'm Carmel. I'm come down from the North Burnett. I'm a visual artist, and yes, we're a Waka Waka.
Great, thanks.
Well, I'm Russell Plunkett. I come from the Burnett, but I'm a citizen of the wood. Okay? Yeah. Seriously. Yeah. And yeah, I'm a poet, I'm a messenger. If you want to hear some of my poetry later, go for it.
Excellent.
I'm Jane Fraser. I'm radical officer for North Burnett. And I'm a Waka Waka country road.
Okay, thanks. So let me just give you a little bit of scoping. This is a 4-year project that was funded by the Australian government to develop a vision for arts and cultural development for the country. Somehow to try and get a shared vision for the arts for the country that we can use over time to get some certainty into the system. So a vision that can be accepted by all political parties. It won't affect what they decide to fund from time to time, probably, but at least trying to have something in this country that says we, as the nation of Australia, aspire to be like this. So we're doing consultations all around the country, and we are particularly here trialling, not having to be in each place, like to use regional Australia as a sort of guinea pig really for what happens when you're not all in the same place, and how can we connect with each other remotely. So we have a few, we're a bit slow technically here and there, but we've got people streaming the session from all over the country. We've got these 3 major sites who will present, and we've got people in the room, and we'll try and bring that together as a conversation about what is the future for regional rural arts in Australia. So the presenters will go to 2030, which is what we asked them to do, be in 2030 and tell us what your place will be like in 2030. And then let's look back and see what were the hurdles you had to overcome in order to achieve the dream that you've created for yourself. So it'll be an open session as soon as we'll run the presentations, and then when we've run them, we'll have an open conversation between this room and those people. Anyone else who's remotely streaming in can send in, can type in questions. They can't speak, but can send in. So we might get messages from other people. So that's what we're asking you to do. Can you call yourself into 2030 and say, what will it be like in our community if it's how we want it to be, and what will we have to get out of the way in order to make that true? So let's start the presentations. We'll go Western Australia and their projects in Katanning, and they'll talk about that. And then we'll go to Bendigo, and then to Darwin. All right, Monica, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks guys. So I'll just begin quickly by a brief explanation of what we'll be talking about. So Can's been working on Noongar country for over 10 years. That is the southwest of WA in short. The project we're looking at today is called Place Names, which is really it's a multi-year funded arts and language program, which is about unpacking the meaning and the names and the meaning behind the places on which we live and the land on which we live. So we'll focus a bit on Mulga today, and Jerry Hayden will explore a lot more about what 2030 might look like. And we're going to use Katanning and a project that focuses on a Dreamtime story called Mulga. The only other thing I'd like to add about the town of Katanning is that since the 1970s, it's been really well known and has a high profile for its multicultural community. So in talking to the elders in that region, they felt very much that the First Nations voices had been quite silenced in profile publicly. So this project is really important to them through those eyes, and Jerry can talk a bit more like that. So first of all, Jerry, if we move forward to 2030, what would that look like to you in Katanning and the Noongar people?
Well, I see it, and a lot of the Noongar and elders down there in Katanning see it as a start, I guess, in learning their language, which was never taught because of the missions, and it needs to come back. Their children need to know their language, and this project actually does all of that. And the beauty of it is that the story has a story at the end. It's a moral of the story, and the moral of the story actually will help our Noongar children and our Noongar people in the area to understand their language, to learn their language, and to move forward as a community, as a whole community, and build partnerships. I guess the partnerships is the most important thing, especially where Noongar people have never been heard, and their culture was never allowed to be taught, and their language was never allowed to be taught. And we're in the 20th century now, so you know, in 2030, I think that the leadership group that they've got there working is an amazing group. It's not just 1 or 2 people, it's about 10 people, and those 10 people are the movers and shakers within the community there, which they are very much lost for a long time, and they're coming back.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. So I'm just going to pick up on a couple of the key things because we don't have a lot of time and there's so much to unpack in 2030. A couple of those things that you've mentioned was partnership and how partnerships would look at that time, and also language, everyone speaking language and honouring the language, something that had been, you know, erased for so long. What sort of things have to get out of the way, have to happen for that to occur in the future?
Well, they got to start at the beginning now, along with the wider community, and the wider community have to know that there is a culture, there is a Noongar culture of the Bibbulmun Nation, and that's been hidden for years. And with this group coming out, the partnerships are very important, because what they need is good partnerships that will actually be there for the future, for their future kids that are coming through, those little ones who are just starting to learn language. You know, they also have not just with the language, but they have their life ahead of them. They need to have something in place in Katanning so that they can actually draw on. And with the partnerships like the tree planting, Greening Australia or something, great partnership there, and that can go, you know, that can go on for a long time, because of the number of trees, because of the number of ploughings, and you know, we need to bring back the environment, and this is a good way of actually doing it within the communities. There will be training and employment for people, also with the with our culture. We have, you know, we have to we base our cultures on law and custom, storytellings, songs, music and dance. And this is all a part of it, you know, not just the hip hop which we see all the time, every day. We've got to teach our children that this is where they come from. This is, you know, they belong there, because a lot of our children grow up thinking, who am I? What am I? You know, we have to give that all back to them. And through this story and through this programming and through the place names, Katanning is a very rich place because of the number of place names that are Noongar names, and nobody knows about it. And this is actually bringing everybody closer together because it's very interesting and they want to know more, and it's bringing up a lot of things. So just Katanning alone and the little surrounding areas is going to open up a big area, and I think it's going to be past 2030.
That's great, Jerry. And you've answered almost the last question that I had in depth in such a short time frame, so thank you. But if I just dig a little bit, is the Mulka story itself, and when you talk about law and customs and storytelling, how might that Mulka story contribute to honouring that and elevating that in the future? How do you think?
Yeah, well, when we look at our community, our whole community is actually broken, not just in Katanning, but all over Noongar country that I'm talking about, elsewhere, I suppose. But we have to look at the way that our children are reared up, our children, where they go from there. So looking at this story, our story, beliefs, values, emotions and aspirations, this story is based on. And as we go along, the moral of the story is because of wrong marriage. You can't have wrong marriage. We've got to teach our kids that, you know, there is right and wrong when it comes to marriage, looking for boyfriend and girlfriend, you know, the system. And here we go is like, okay, this story will teach our children why this story is based on cast out Mulka and his girlfriend Jinder, and what they've actually done was wrong, and they can't do that, you know. And we have to teach our children this because consequences will happen if there's a wrong way of marriage. And the other part of it is taking care of country. You know, at the end, Jinder, how she actually wanted to destroy Mulka because Mulka did her wrong in the end, cast her away. That's not right. You don't do that. You have to work together, and he didn't want her. So, you know, she said, okay, this is it, and destroyed the evil, helped to destroy the evil, and of course the new generation will actually flourish through, and a new growth will actually come into for our kids for the future. And I guess this tree planting is actually similar to what this story is based on, not knowing what the outcome was of that.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
That's fabulous. I think we've used up all our time, but I think there's nothing more to add to what Jerry said, because that's how 2030 could be in Katanning and in the surrounding town.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so
we can talk more.
We're going. We're coming. Give me a minute. Here we go. Multicultural Arts Victoria. This is a particular project. We've got Forrest and Bugay and Amani online to talk to us about how they see the future. Forrest, off you go.
Okay, we're going to move through time, not through space. We're going to be rooted here on Jaja country for our whole 7-minute conversation. Just quickly start the timer. So just to start off, we work with people from a refugee background, people from culturally diverse backgrounds, and very importantly, traditional owners and First Nations people from all over Australia that live here in Bendigo. So it's about bringing artists and cultural leaders from all of those diverse groups together to create intercultural things and to build capacity to work together. And so just to get, Bendigo historically has been an incredibly white place. So just to get a little bit of context for that, we're going to actually go back 10 years and hear a little bit from Bugay about what it was like being one of the first Korean family to come to Bendigo. What was it like for you?
So like 10 years ago when we first came, Bendigo is really, really white, and we feel so isolated, and there was no we don't really know about the Aboriginal cultures that exist. We never told that people other cultures exist in Bendigo, and we feel isolated. We don't feel belong in this land because of the influenced by the white people. Sorry, and yeah, and we have nowhere where we can maintain our culture and traditional, and where we can go to a place where we keep our traditional and culture alive. And we felt like we don't belong in this place because there is nothing that we can do, and we're going to lose and our identity, and we're going to lose all our culture because there is no place where we can maintain that culture, and there is no place where we can create. There is no place where we can see the future, because there's no merge hub. There is nothing that we can do. We just come and have to learn, adapt to a new culture there, where we don't even have the language skill to do that. It was very difficult, and we don't feel like we belong in this place, and we don't feel like we welcome to stay in this place. Yeah, basically,
So yeah, pretty grim
experience. Yes.
Really. Have you got anything you want to add, Armani, just briefly?
So first, moving to Bendigo, there wasn't really much African nor Sudanese, so we felt really isolated. And the first 2 years, our family kind of just kept to ourselves, because it wasn't really people to connect with or like places to go. Yeah.
So now we're going to shoot forward to 2030, and Emerge Cultural Hub only started in 2018 in Bendigo, but by 2030 it's going to be amazing. It is amazing. Here we are in 2030. I don't work for MEV anymore. I just work in my own studio at home, and I come and visit the Emerge Cultural Hub, which is co-located with Multicultural Services, big multicultural hub. So it's a place that a family can arrive, and there's something for small children to do, there's something for elderly people to do. Artists of all ages can be involved. It's intergenerational, and people are working in a cross-cultural way. There's about 20 people employed, and what does it feel like now compared to then?
It feels like now that the community, the Korean community are growing, and the South Sudan community are growing, and the Afghan community are growing. We have a place where we can go and practice, learn our tradition, and the older artists passing down their traditional art to the new generations. And my daughter Scarlett is, she's learning her old tradition, and she's learning Korean, and also the South Sudanese community run a Dinka class. And for the new arrival to come to Australia, to come to Bendigo, and they have a place there they can go and meet people and to connect with other culture, and they don't feel like they are isolated. There is nothing stop them to accessing the service, and there is nothing stop them to attend activities, for example, like art activities, and they can come anytime, where there is a Korean person is working at the Emerge Culture Hub, can assist them and make them feel like they're belonging, and there's no language barrier there. In this 2030 here. And people feel like they were home, and they connecting together, and the other culture join together, and creating amazing art. Then we have the multicultural art exhibition, where people from a different background can exhibit their art shows, and the artists they get paid from their work, and the wider community also know that the emerged community are in Bendigo, and this community are not new. They here for a long time. And the community belong to this town, and they are part of this town. They are just not a temporary people. They are people that came to this town to make this place as a home and build up a future in this town, this hometown.
Yeah. And a couple of things have changed in 2032 with immigration laws changed, which meant that more people could come from families. So back in 2019, there was a lot of people who couldn't participate in emerge activities because they had to look after their children, or they had to go and work at the chicken factory or things like that. Whereas now the aunties and grandmothers and other people have been able to come. There's more people to look after children. Within Emerge Cultural Hub, there's childcare and children's activities as well. And people are able to bring their whole family. And we've got artists immigrating to come here because there is such wonderful opportunity to create artworks and to earn an income for your work. And there's also a universal basic income for artists, so there's no barrier to participating in our activities. But I think that's our time.
Yeah.
So anything else that you want to say, Amani?
I think she's basically covered. Like, the Sudanese community will be booming, participating, getting everyone to know more about our culture, and just integrating with the wider community.
Yeah, and people coming from all over Australia and internationally to see what's happening, because there's so many arts activities and shows and really exciting cross-cultural things happening. Yeah. So that's it from us.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you very much. Right, let's go to Darwin. Are you ready, Bong and Anna? Off you go.
Oh, there we are.
Okay, we are not muted now. Greetings from 2030, courtesy of this magic time machine presented by Arts Front and Arts Ablaze. Anna Weeks, my colleague here, will talk to you about what's happening in 2030 after I give you a brief background on how we got here. So if I can please, I'll just share a bunch of words with you now. Okay. As you can see, even in 2030, we still use PowerPoint things. So in 11 years ago, we looked at our purpose and decided to refocus it. So we decided that our purpose should be that we make and share art in a fragile world. That was in response to the climate emergency and the ecological crisis. If you look back to 2019, you remember, I hope, that several parliaments declared a climate emergency. So many reports on how bad things were, and that we had 11 to 30 years before things would be irreparable. So in response to that, we said, well, we will make and share art in a fragile world. Sorry, I'm trying to get... So that became one of our big ideas in 2019. Because there is no art on a dead planet. Anything we wanted to do would be pointless if we can't even go out in the world and do things, because we'd all fry. Now, our response, one of the ideas we adopted to respond to this is that we wanted system change, not climate change. So it's not just doing recycling and all of that, which we still needed to do, But there were systemic reasons why the planet was dying, so we needed systemic responses to it. And I guess one of the big responses is this. If you remember Bill Clinton and Mob saying it's the economy stupid, which was really another way of championing and pushing neoliberalism. So our way of telling neoliberalism to F off is it's the community stupid. The Joburg memo of 2002, which was about fairness in the fragile world, so you'll know where I stole the idea of art in fragile world, says that the community is central to any efforts to fight climate change and to save the planet. What we need to do is to increase the power of communities over the Earth's resources, rather than allowing corporations and other greedy entities to continue destroying the planet. So in this case, what we do in community arts and cultural development is quite, well, it's important in terms of increasing the power of communities. But also among the many communities, our many communities, we should remember that it's First Nations first. Arts Front has been saying that for a while, because First Nation peoples have the knowledge and the experience and ancient wisdom on how to care for the earth. So anything we do must be guided and informed by that when we speak of communities. So again, it's the community stupid. The other expression of that is Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I'll just read one subsection of that if I can find it. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. So we want everyone, absolutely everyone, to make and share art, because that's the only way that our art, can change the world. Everyone has to do it. Now, some of the things we were talking about in 2019 included this idea of the community is the artist, in response, I guess, to this dominant model where community arts and cultural development is described as professional artists working with non-artists or community members, which I personally have found very strange for more than 20 years now. So we decided, look, maybe if we thought differently, if we didn't separate artists and communities and consider that anyone who made art was an artist, and we saw, if we saw community members who make art as artists, we would come up with different imaginations of the art that needs to be made and shared. Because that framework, that paradigm of professional artists plus community equals community arts doesn't really capture a lot of the reality that we face when we make and share art in different contexts of community. So this thing was useful. We're still coming to terms with it. We're still discussing what that actually means. And I just remembered from many, many years ago, as you can tell, I'm very old, in the 90s, we had the Community Environment Art and Design program out of Australia Council. And I think maybe there's a need to look at that again. Design is important for that. Anyway, that's community artists. Now, how do we do that as an organization? We decided we should be very community-like, absolutely. So we want to abolish hierarchy, because hierarchy is evil. So we've decided to adopt holacracy, which is an operating system for organizations who want to operate from principles of self-management and autonomy, where no one else has the power to compel anyone else to do anything. So we started that in 2019. We're still grappling with it. It's not easy to forget bad habits of hierarchy and domination and all of that stuff. So that is our official system now, the way we're trying to do things. And to end on a personal note, from Paris in 1968, that has guided me. I think I've been trying to corrupt the ideals of my colleagues, to be realistic, to demand the impossible. That's it from me.
And so it is very hot. In the top end, we did see the 1.5 degree warming. And in the rural area where I live and work on Larrakia, Woolna country, people got stuck indoors a bit, you know. We're staying in our aircon bunkers a bit. And the only place that we would interact together would be in the, you know, the small Woolworths. Everywhere else was too hot. So we started to gather and recognise that we weren't meeting. People were lonely. We were lonely. So we were like, how do we connect, and how do we, you know, this is all taking place over the last 10 years. And how do we reconnect with each other and make our environment more livable? Because we're lonely, and we don't like being lonely, and we want to make art together. So we called on a lot of the resources that were new to Australia. So we had quite a few climate refugees, so people from the Melanesian, Polynesian islands came and are living in Darwin now in the rural area. And we worked very closely with our First Nations people, and we started to make our environment more habitable again through producing ephemeral structures. So the community and the art, everybody would work together and we'd create shade structures, and they were huge shade structures, and they would catch the wind, and they would and they weren't permanent, so they weren't using resources that would continue to damage the environment that we were really still damaging very severely. We haven't managed to overthrow the capitalist system just yet, and so we would sit together and we created, we're in the process now, and we've created a few, and they're only short term because we have massive cyclones, so they're there for a year, these structures, but they are immense shade cooling structures where, again, our community could gather. They were made out of natural resources that we found, and they were actually made out of gamba grass, which is an atrocious weed that we have here, which actually increases our carbon emissions. Because it burns so hot at a late time of the year. So we started to use all of these ecological knowings and built shade structures that were ephemeral, and we started to gather again, and we started to reimagine a new future. We have started to reimagine a new future beyond this dystopia. Looking back 10 years, I think what we were able to do as community and artists is to recognise that this catastrophe that we're on the brink of, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to break down the system, make a new system, build a world of care, a world of neighbourliness, where we share our resources and understand, you know, we open our door to each other and we collaborate, and we imagine, you know, and we speculate and imagine anything that could be other than what it is. And it's going to keep going. It's never going to be perfect. I think that's all I've got right here.
It's hot in 2030.
Yeah, now.
So what I want to ask people to do is not to ask them questions. We'll give you their contact details. They've all handed us contact details, so if you want to know more about their projects, you can do it outside this session. But for us to reflect on what they've said, what struck you, what was it, what, you know, chimed somehow in your system? What's your vision for your community for 2030? Like, where are we going? Excellent.
Taken a lot on board from those 3 different communities, 3 different projects, and our community is probably one of the largest council areas in Queensland. There's a lot of distance between our towns. There's 5 larger towns and a lot of little small communities. Our biggest barriers now, not in 2030, is that we have a certain time of the year where our region is a very high fruit producing region, And we have a lot of cultures coming to our towns, and our population's nearly double in size. But there's never many activities for us to be inclusive. It feels like there's not an inclusiveness. They go to work, they come home, they stay in the caravan parks or at campsites on orchards, and we don't get the opportunity to embrace all of these wonderful multicultural experiences that they could be teaching us. But on the other hand, we have a high Indigenous population as well who could be teaching. You know, they're coming to our country and want to learn about our histories as well. So what I would love to see personally is, and because it's such the distance thing, is, you know, to be able to come up with projects. We have one in the pipeline, but to come up with something that is inclusive of the many different nationalities that come to our region, but they can also embrace our Indigenous heritage, learn maybe some of the languages. That first one is a good idea. Some of them come to our region and they meet somebody and they end up marrying and staying. So I can fully understand the Bendigo group's idea that they don't feel welcome to start off with. So how do we break down those barriers and provide, through the arts, we may be able to provide something like a hub where they can come together and feel like a welcome place to share experiences. Yeah, thanks.
Who else? Who wants to have a response? Kirsty?
Thank you. I reflected quite a lot after yesterday's program as well, and listening to those presentations this morning was just fabulous. I loved Paul's stuff in Darwin, because I lived in Darwin for 2 years as well. So loved his approach. But I was reflecting on Tablelands Regional Council, where I've only been for just over 12 months, so I'm still a newbie. My belief is that in 2030, the Tablelands Regional Council will be full of creative people who've been there for many, many years, but we will have found our dynamic, articulate, creative voice that will convince the decision makers of the value of the work that artists do. It will be recognised and valued. And I have to say that since 2019, there is a God, the words gone out of my mind. Not cultural, demographic shift, because many people who've been working for years at JCU in Townsville and Cairns are all retired, have all retired to the Tablelands. So there's been a huge demographic change and a lot better articulation of things that are valuable and worthwhile. Okay, thanks.
I'm a migrant. I came here on a bloody big boat that they couldn't turn back. It was a can run. Okay? And I'm hoping that in 2030 we'll have the fuddy-duddies from the past generation. They might just filter off, and all the young people that I'm seeing now standing up, they'll be there. And I'm looking forward to a damn good time.
Great. So, yes, please.
I'm hoping that in 2030 that imagination and intuition are valued in our education system as much as intellect, and I believe then we will have a much more balanced society.
Let me ask you this question, and indeed all of our panellists. What is it you think we have to kick out of the way in order to achieve what our dreams are for 2030? What do we have to change?
Focus on the money. Sorry, get rid of the focus on money as the be-all and end-all. Start recognising that fourth pillar that people have been talking about for many, many years.
So let me ask the panellists. Now you've heard each other. Bon, what do you reckon? What do we have to change?
Well, we have to overthrow capitalism, basically. I think it's system change, not climate change. It is the system that is wrecking the planet and our lives. So we have to find alternatives to it. And it's a very big picture thing, but I think basically that is for me, we have to overthrow capitalism.
Yeah, that's great. Anna?
Yeah, I agree. I think everything that we do that is counter capitalism is effective. So instead of being driven by an economy of finance, we're driven by an economy of care, where those things that, looking after each other, looking after the earth are valued beyond finances.
Monica?
I think breaking down the neoliberal status and state at the moment, and even broader than that for the world, is the nation state. There are so many displaced people that we have to, as a world, think about how we operate differently. And that, I know that's a huge, I agree, Bong, it's a huge system change. But we have a lot to learn from First Nations people on this, a lot to learn. So I think 2030, listening to our First Nations people deeply and changing the way that we think about our boundaries that have just been implemented and put on us for capitalist purposes could be a much more beautiful, inclusive world, and break down a lot of the barriers that we have in the way right now that are just constructed. They're not real.
Jerry?
I agree with the group from Darwin and Monica. Coming from First Nations people, we just have to live and let live as Aboriginal people. Whatever comes our way, whatever we can take, we have to take it. We can't keep fighting a government that's not going to support Aboriginal people across the nation. We're going to have to start working with it. We've fought, we had old people actually paved the way for us as Aboriginal people. And we have a lot of Wodjila people. Wodjila people are new people. That's not Indigenous to Australia. So, it's like those people are the most precious gift that we as Aboriginal groups can actually have when we work in the arts, because who else is going to help us? We can't get by unless we have people such as you to help us, walk with us, guide us. And I guess I can truly say that Ken, been with them for 10 years or so, I lost count, but they've actually walked with us all the way, and the Noongar communities that they actually work with, and doing the hard yakka regarding the consultation with government to provide us with the resources that we actually need. And we just get on with the job and working in the community and making things happen for the community so that their social emotional well-being will be good for them and their children.
Thank you. Forrest?
I agree with everything that we've just heard from WA and Darwin, and also to add that I noticed that the arts are very white, and there's often a lot of privilege and a lot of power and access given to particularly to white men, and the leadership of most arts companies is by white people. So I think it's something that everyone can do, is look at where they have privilege and start to look at how they can devolve some of that. So we can all look into decolonising and opening space and doing things differently, because I think the way that things are isn't great and it's not working for everyone. We know there's all the statistics that show how incredibly beneficial for people's health engaging in the arts is as participants and as viewers, and we just need to open things up more.
Thank you. Marnie?
Yeah, so basically what Forrest said, and also the government need to stop being greedy and listen to more what the community want instead of their needs and stuff. I reckon That could be one thing.
All right, let me ask the room this then. We're going to give the government advice at the end of this project. And there's a lot of themes going here. I mean, we've got the education one, we've got health, we've got diversity and integrating communities, we've got First Nations first, we've got climate, we've got not just democratising the arts, but building people's participation and confidence in them being part of the arts community. We had a lot of, so yesterday we talked to Queensland organisations and we had themes there about engagement of people with disabilities, about artists and collaboration and getting out of the silos that we're in. So we're sitting on a lot of themes now. What I want to ask you is, what do you think the priorities are? If you were, help us to refine what's happening so that we can tell the government these are the things that need to be focused on, and so that we can tell ourselves in our vision, here are the things that we need to be looking at. We might have all of those things in the room, but I'd really like to go round and get everyone to say, what's your priority topic? Just start anywhere, hand the mic over.
To keep these conferences going. I mean, so many people we're on track. Keep going. We want a lot more of these things happening all over the place. This is magical. Keep going.
And I do need to just point out that we're nervous about our capacity to keep going, because, not least of all, because of the climate impact, which is why we're putting so much energy into trying to do this, trying to work out how we are going to stay talking to each other without having to be sitting on the same piece of grass.
Yeah, I agree with Russell in that, we don't get these opportunities to have a voice. And you come together and you meet so many like-minded people and you realise that you're not alone. And you're not afraid to get up and say what you want to say in front of them. And if you've got an idea, share it with somebody, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? And through your council, don't be afraid of them as well. And that's a big issue. Is people, they're always abusing councils, sort of think they're spending their money on, but there are officers there that will help. Yes. And that's all they're trying to do. So don't hate your council, work with them. Yeah.
I think I would like to that it just be an established fact that art assists with community wellbeing and connectedness, and it's not something that you have to keep proving or lobbying for. And I'd like it to be a fact that's known right across all different government departments, so that when you want to work with the community to create, say, public art, or create a town identity, or put on workshops, whatever, the benefits of that project is established, it's known, and the planning department know that, and every department know that, and going right across state departments too, so you're not constantly arguing the same argument all the time.
Okay, great, thank you.
I've got a lot of thoughts on this. I think I agree with the gentleman here that we need to have these kind of forums, but I'm going to put a pessimistic hat on. Quite often these forums we continue to talk to ourselves. We are already the converted into the art space, and we know the benefits. And within Australia, we've got more than, so I come from an arts education background, we've got more than 25 years of very, very well-grounded research that has proven the benefits of arts engagement for children and young people in areas like health, in areas like school retention, all of those kind of things. So we've got all of that data, and it's very well communicated within our community. What I think we have to do is be a bit bolder in terms of talking outside of our community. So infiltrate is the word I want to use. Other forums. So go and talk in health forums. Go and talk in education forums. Go and talk in economic forums. So that our voice and our research and our lived knowing of the impact of the arts is not just to our community, but we start to, like an octopus, send tentacles out into other forums so other people hear about our power.
Great, thank you.
I'm a researcher, so I've just spent those last 4 or 5
You put the mic.
Sorry, yeah, I'm a researcher, so I've spent the last 4 or 5 years working in regional, rural, and remote communities around the arts. I also grew up in Roma and Mitchell, and the thing that strikes me is for young people in those communities, it still looks the way it did when I was there. It's all the people, I mean middle-aged white women who are putting on arts activities. So I think that, to me, one of the most pressing issues is when Forrest grew up, and that was for people who already run arts organisations who make those decisions to share power, share space, bring in younger people, bring in people who aren't from the arts, bring in people from community organisations, and of course, First Nations first as well. But for the arts to start thinking of what we look like, and we need to look different to the way we look at the moment. So we need diversity, and we need to be willing to share and hand over power to other groups now.
Fabulous, thanks.
Yeah, I agree with some of the other speakers too, but I just think it's the community that's really important, and that to recognise that we're all hearing very diverse stories from rural and regional areas, and not to just assume that just rural and regional are all the same. They are very different. I love the idea in Darwin about having those places of shade to get together, and then others in Bendigo about bringing in community members to new to the space to have them bring their stories in and share those. So I think it's two things: realising the individuality of each place, and it will be different, and then connecting those through this type of network platforms, so you can have community practice across Australia. It's very important.
There's probably two things in my head. One is similar to something someone's already said about through policy and through government, making sure that the arts is part of the understanding that it makes a valuable community. It's part of what you need within a city. You need all of the things, but you also need the arts to be part of that. But also, the regional and probably more remote, something around access, something around, a lot of our money, I guess, goes to bigger organisations, and how that might go to the smaller communities and also give them access to quality art.
Okay, thank you.
So I originally come from New Zealand. I originally come from New Zealand, where I was born and raised in Christchurch. I went to Taotai in the Māori language. And so I've been living in Australia 20 years, some kind of and what I'm particularly would love to see by 2030 here in Australia would be First Nations people to be really more empowered and at the forefront of their cultural expression, to be treasured and appreciated by non-Indigenous people. That's going to be a bigger shift that I would love to see.
Following on from that, I'm the Ras and Cape York and Torres Strait Regional Arts Officer, and one of the things that people have been saying to me is that in the communities, the art leaves the community, and the community people don't see that art. The children don't see it. The artists go and they have an exhibition, whether it's in Cairns or Brisbane or Stockholm, overseas, and the art's not staying in the community; it's leaving. And so the people who live in those communities don't have access to the art. They don't see it. They don't understand the stories, and so there's not this follow-on. So I think one of the things I'm working towards is how can we actually make sure that the best art stays in the community, and that this means that the whole focus on art about economic outcomes needs to change, because there's actually cultural collateral. This is actually the richness of that community is being sold in the visual arts, that people are leaving the community and taking that otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with the regional access, being as far as the new or the recent trend of men's sheds, that is expanded further, because there's lots of people that live in communities that have skills and are redundant and marginalised because they're over 50 or they're not well or whatever. So everyone should be able to participate, and there needs to be the resources for those people to participate on a ground level.
Thank you. Look, probably beating the same drum that I was beating before, I think probably one of the most fundamental pieces of advice to take back to the federal government would be recognising the value of the triple bottom line, something where you've got to recognise the value of things that aren't necessarily attached to a dollar. Until that happens, then we're fighting a losing battle. Just very quickly, if anybody can remember 30 years back, there was a wonderful New Zealand economist called Marilyn Waring, and she did a fabulous doco on the comparison between things that were given a dollar value and things that were incredibly valuable but didn't have dollars attached to them. So please tell the federal government to start recognising the empirical value of things that aren't necessarily dollar driven, and get rid of the state so you've got the money to
You come tomorrow.
One more to go.
As a practicing artist, as a practicing artist,
I have to be able to hear you. It's the people online who can't hear you.
As a practicing artist, I would say everything that's been said in the room. Things that I come up against are things like people who are in bureaucracy as cultural gatekeepers, and we actually have to pass that power back over to the artist so that we can have more artist-led discussions and outputs, and we trust the artist to develop and navigate different types of projects, as well as First Nations and artist-led as well.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to make an admission here. I was a production engineer at the Gladstone Power Station, the biggest coal-fired power station in Queensland. Now I write musicals about pollution. The reason why I started writing these things was because I went to most of the local musicals, community and school musicals, and most of them were terrible. They were American, 15, 60 years old, and they cost us a lot of money. Now, here's the economic thing. A heap of money goes over to America and a lesser amount to the UK, which we could be using here. We could be using it to develop our own musical production industry. Now, we already produce great soapies. They're sold overseas, they go to America, they go to the UK. We're good at that. We also make some pretty good films, but we don't really produce any musicals as such. So that's what I'm trying to change in Gladstone. And to be able to do that, I've got to get the community to work together. And then government funding to travel it. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Okay. I just want to pick up the very first thing about being able to meet together and how important it is. And I reflect back. So we did a session yesterday with case studies from Queensland, and they were fantastic. It was really good. But now we've had some input nationally. I realised that yesterday we were a bit inward looking in the conversation that we had, and that once you bring in other people, how much broader you start to think about what the issues are and what to do with them. And tomorrow, we're going to bring in some internationals. So I'm going to be really interested to see what happens to this discussion when we get an international perspective onto it. There are significant threads from yesterday to today and from all the other consultations that we've had. So if you're around at 9:15 tomorrow morning, I'd like to give you a bit of a reflection back over what those threads have been and where the conversation seems to be going, and invite, so we've got two people from a rural community organisation who are in drought, coal, you know, in crisis in the US, and invite them to share the perspectives that they've got on what's likely, you know, where could you go in 2020, what are the challenges that we're facing now. So for today, it's been fabulous. I'm really glad you all came. Would you first thank our presenters who were terrific. Thanks everyone, and thanks to all of you for coming and making such a useful contribution. Hang on.
So one thing, or two things very quickly to add. We're going to try and keep this conversation going after the conference, and so a lot of the role that these fabulous presenters have done is designed to stimulate other rural and regional voices into the visioning for rural and regional. So we're going to do that using the Arts Time platform and other meetings and gatherings like this. So we'll send you information about that. All the resources have been and the stories have been shared so far will be a part of that stuff. And then just to let you know that the Arts Front project from here goes to the next stage of developing the National Compact. These sorts of conversations have been going on in other forums across the country, are being brought together to develop a compact for the future of arts and culture in Australia for 2030. So trying to distill the essence of a lot of these things under a rights-based framework. So around about this time next year, we'll be putting an event on that will enable people to come together with the idea of signing off on that compact and committing to the sort of change we need to get the vision that we're coming up with as a group together. So just to give you a heads up about where that's heading, and lots of opportunities to stay connected and continue to contribute. So thank you very much for your input today, it's been great. Oh, and there's a photo competition, a great prize. If you're interested, have a check on the conference website this evening. And good luck with that one.
Sarah thinks she's going to win because nobody else has put their photos up.
Yeah, don't let her ruin it.
Thanks, everyone.
You guys can enter online too. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.